Hi everyone, in this lecture we are going to create the progress in counter functions. Alright, so first off, let's go into our necessary variables, and in here I want to do I want to create some variables along with doing some calculations. So I'm going to say const, let's create the question time first. So the time for each question is going to be 10 seconds. And that's basically says 10 seconds. All right. So the time for each question is 10 seconds. Let's go ahead and let's create our gauge width. So this is the gauge width. Whenever each second passes, the gauge width is going to be like the color for that is going to be incremented by a certain number. All right. And this is where we create that. And I'm going to set it to 800. And I'm going to tell you exactly where this 800 is coming from. Now the gauge width is the number for that is 800. The reason for that is that this gauge that we have from here all the way to here, it is going to be 800 pixels. And we can see that inside our CSS, and we can see because the gauge itself, it is empty. The gauge is empty. This gauge background, it is empty. We don't have any content for it. So we need to provide it with some sort of dimension. So if I come down here, we can see that this gauge background, it has a height of 10 pixels. So this height, this very little height is going to be 10 pixels, and the width is going to be 800. We could go ahead and increase the height to 100 pixels, which is not going to look good. All right, that's why it's 10 pixels. And now you know that this is actually the dimensions for this gauge. So the dimension is 800 pixels. We're not worried about the pixels for now. We just want to get this 800. So that's why the gauge width is 800 dynamically, which comes from the 800 pixels. And the next variable that I'm going to create is going to make the most sense. This is going to be gauge unit. What is the gauge unit? The gauge unit is the incrementation of this gauge. So each time a second passes, we are going to see that this background, this color is being incremented. What is this increment? This increment each time is going to be 80 pixels because we have 10 seconds. Like, this is very simple math. We have 10 seconds and we have a bar that is 800 pixels. So 800 divided by 10 seconds, we are going to get 80 pixels. So if we want to sync this bar with this counter, we need to divide this bar into 10 equal portions because we have 10 seconds. Each equal portion is going to be 80 pixels. And we want to increment. Whenever each second passes, we want to increment this bar or this gauge with 80 pixels. And we need that 80 pixels to be calculated inside the JavaScript. So we are going to grab our gauge width. Gauge width. Gauge. Is it G? Is it Y? Okay. Why is it Q? It should be G. And is it GUA or GAU? I think it's GAU. So let's say it doesn't really matter as long as you understand what it says, but I'm just going to set it to GAU. I think it is here as well. Yeah, it is GAU. So where are we? We are right here. That's why it wasn't working. So GAU unit, and not the unit. We want to grab the width. And we want to divide it by the question time. Where is the question time? Where is it? We should see, yeah, here it is. So 800 divided by 10, we are going to get 80. So the increment is going to be 80 pixels. Semicolon. This is going to be 80 pixels. right? And I want to create another variable here, but I'm not gonna add any value to it, and we are just gonna initialize it, right? So we are just gonna initialize it, and we are gonna change the value dynamically. All right, so let's come down here and let's create our render progress function. All right, so in here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say render progress function. So this is the function that is responsible for creating these 10 boxes down here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say function render progress. There is no parameter, and in here what do we want to do? We want to create 10 boxes dynamically, not one box, 10 boxes. And these 10 boxes, they are related to 10 questions. So let's go ahead and let's use a for loop. We are going to say let, and we are going to create a very comprehensive loop variable that is going to be question index. And we are going to say it starts from 0. And then the question index is going to go all the way to be equal or less than, the value is going to be equal or less than or equal to our last question. And each time it runs, we are going to increment it by 1. And now we have created our for loop, all right? But what is this last question? So let's take a look at it. This is the last question. The last question is going to be the questions the length minus 1. So the last question is going to give us the index of the last item inside the array, which is 9. All right, so it is going to go all the way to be equal to 9, and it is going to create those many because it starts from 0. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 9. We are going to get 10 progress bars or 10 progress boxes, right, to be more accurate. Where do we want those progress boxes? We are going to grab our progress that we have selected inside the progress container, and we are going to say inner HTML. We are going to add it to that, but we are not gonna make it equal to that. We are going to add it onto it. We are going to append it to this progress container. The reason for that is because we are creating 10 of these. If we simply say an equal sign, it is going to create the first one, and then when the second one is created, the first one is going to be replaced by the second one. And when the third one is created, the second one is going to be replaced by the third one. All right? But we do not want to replace anything by anyone, and we want to add on. So when the first one is created, then we want to add a second one to it, then we want to add a third one to it, and all the way to number 10. So this is going to be another dynamic element as well. We are going to create a div. This is going to be a div. And this div is going to have a class. The class is, let's make sure that the syntax is correct. The class is going to be progress-box, all right? And we are also going to have an ID. And you might ask, okay, where is this question index? We are going to use it inside the ID. So each time the question index has a number value, it is going to specify the ID for that specific div that we are creating here. So I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to say, let's put it right here. So this is going to be our question index, and now let's add the closing tag as well. Let's save it. So now we should have successfully created 10 boxes until we just go ahead and render this progress. All right, so we should call this function. Let's call it, let's save it, and let's come in here. We don't see that. And let's take a look at what could be wrong here. So we have our progress container. What is the progress container? The progress container should be our progress container that we have here, right? And if I come down here, we have said progress box. The ID is going to come from here. Render progress for question index, last question, we have done everything correctly. All right, and I think the problem is not inside the JavaScript. The problem is inside the CSS, because now that I'm thinking about it, is I've used in our final product, in our finished application, I didn't use progress box. I used progress bar, which is actually not accurate. So I have to change this class to box. So let's save it. Let's come here, and now we get 10. So the number of this comes from the number of questions that we have. So if I were to come into our questions, and let's say I just replicate this question 2 more times and save it, now we should be able to see 12 boxes. So this is a good thing that we do it through JavaScript. So whenever you want to increase the number of questions, you do not need to worry about the number of boxes that you need to increase as well, because they're going to get increased automatically and dynamically. So we have successfully created our render progress. I wanted to create the render counter function in this lecture as well, but as it seems, it has been postponed to the next lecture. See you guys then.